It's the Alien Conspiracy Podcast. We are your hosts, Agent ETA,
Agent Ether,
Agent Kruger,
and Agent Anderson. Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can follow the show on Twitter at AlienConPod. We also have an email address, alienconpod@protonmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Discord. Links in the description. This week's episode, The Battle of Los Angeles. And we also have a very special guest joining us for the show this week, Braden from Alien Theorists Theorizing. Welcome, Braden.
Yeah, welcome.
The fact that you don't call guests special agents is
right?
upsetting, to say the least. I want to be referred to as Special Agent Braden for the rest of this episode. Thanks for having me on, though. This is honestly one of my favorite UFO cases, so pleasure to be here.
we're glad to have you.
Awesome. Before we get started on the show, actually, the name of this show, Braden helped me choose, although he didn't know. One of your earlier episodes, Braden, you said you made some kind of offhand comment, like you were talking about how you came up with your show's name, and you made an offhand comment like, oh, you'd have to try pretty hard to beat us as far as alphabetical order goes or something like that. And I said to myself, challenge accepted. And that's kind of how I went with this one. I couldn't believe it wasn't taken.
I think I actually made the comment that the only way to beat us would be AAA Alien. But you guys did pretty good. Yeah. Alien Conspiracy. It's simple yet efficient. Like if we were back phone book style, you're popping up way ahead of us.
Yeah. And I just sort of, I checked the name and I couldn't believe that it hadn't been taken already. You know, it's just so generic and it's, the SEO type stuff, I guess. But so that's a little fun story. So why don't you tell us first a little bit about your show for people unfamiliar?
Well, my show is Alien Theorists Theorizing. 4 idiots talk about all things conspiracies and aliens. Doing it for 5 years. Do a weekly case file every week. It's fun. It's more about maintaining connection with my friends who we all live far away, and we all have a passion for the weird and paranormal. So we've been, we just much like you guys, we kind of cover the same kind of topics. Pretty loose, free flow. We're always drinking beers, cussing, smoking. But am I allowed to swear on this podcast? But I should ask you before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right.
Yeah, when I first started it,
Fuck yeah,
baby. No, when I first started this, I wanted to do a non-explicit, more of like a documentary style, just kind of more straight-laced. But we did that for a little while, but thanks to ETA, I changed my mind, and we just do whatever.
I couldn't stop myself from saying stupid shit.
Yeah.
So we at a certain point we kind of had to.
It's in all of us. Don't worry.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it's our show is the same way. It's like we started as we started to gain traction. Our producers was like, "Hey, we would probably it'd be easier if we stopped swearing." And you're like, okay, I'll put that in the back of my mind. Anyways, you guys wouldn't fucking believe this, right? Yeah. Right? It's like it's how I talk. I can't help it. Now if I really try hard, maybe I can keep it within 5 F-bombs and what other.
Yeah, that's admirable. I respect that. That's a respectable number right there.
Well, I'm a professional, right? So
yes, sir. Special agent at that too.
You guys have dialed it down a little bit over time, but you're still a little edgy.
We used to get a lot of heat, so we don't get as much heat anymore as we used to. But that just goes, you try to ride that fine line of like being yourself, but not pissing everyone off at the same time. So it's it's a fun balance.
Yeah, man, I swear sometimes people are made of glass.
Well, I don't know. It seems like on everywhere you go nowadays, I don't care what your political affiliation is. So many people seem to get so offended at the drop of a dime. It's like, what did I say? I didn't think I said nothing.
You're going to get a 1-star review for saying that.
I know. Right? I was offended deeply.
Yeah.
And I was trying to be right up in the middle. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to call anybody out. I never do. But sometimes. But
Well, I speak for the nobodies. You're calling everybody out.
Well, shit.
All
I
right,
don't know where
well,
to go with that.
let's get to this week's case, the Battle of Los Angeles.
Hell yeah.
This one goes back quite a ways to February 25th, 1942. Hold on just a second. Buddy, shut up.
He just wants his 2 cents. Put it in.
That stupid dag.
I agree with him fully.
You want a treat walk over to Grandma's house?
Yeah.
Oh.
He's quiet all day. He's just like sleeping, and that's it. As soon as we hit record, guy goes berserk. All right, anyways, let's try that again. We're talking about the Battle of Los Angeles. This happened a long time ago on February 25th, 1942. And one of the interesting things to me about this case is this is before the so-called modern UFO era, which started in 1947 with Kenneth Arnold's sighting. So this is way before that, but it checks all the boxes. It has multiple independent witnesses. We have government documents. We have even a photograph to go along with the case. So this is a really,
very famous
really good
photograph.
One. Yeah.
This thing went viral before the internet.
Yeah.
Like this case, like looking back, like this incident made headlines across the United States.
Yeah, this was a big deal back in the day, especially because of when it happened. This was just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. So because of that alone, everybody was on edge. But actually, it was also 2 days after a Japanese submarine had launched some shells at an oil production facility just north of Santa Barbara. So especially in Southern California, everybody was on edge and worried that they were going to be attacked at any time. And Los Angeles is right there on the coast. So if a submarine rolled in, they'd be shelling houses and businesses and everything. It would be a bad scene. So everybody was kind of on edge. Everybody was really worried. And I think also because of that, everybody was, looking up and around more often. They're more around their surroundings. So that could also be why there were just so many witnesses who saw this thing.
Well, and there was like mobs of they would have like the whole West Coast was such on edge. Like this is one of the things that I loved about this because it kind of paints a picture of like you can kind of relate with how things are now to back then. It's like they would have mandatory blackouts because they didn't want the lights of buildings on the West Coast to be a target for these Japanese subs and stuff. So if you left your business lights on, mobs would come and just basically vandalize your business and like smash all your lights and smash out because they're like, you're not following the restrictions.
Oh, you didn't want to turn your lights off? Well, we'll turn them off for you. I remember hearing stories about that happening like in Seattle as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like all over the West Coast. To me, that's wild. You just had like group mobs policing themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when it's crazy too. Like one of the things I found was a little eye-opening was like I like World War II history, but it's not like I know a ton about it. I actually didn't know about that Elwood oil field attack near Santa Barbara. Before looking into this, like I said, it's not like I know much. But like
we can put some quotations around attack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was a 20-minute sustained attack. They actually did attack though, right?
Yeah.
They used the main deck gun on their submarine. But I think most people don't even realize like mainland United States was actually attacked by the Japanese,
Yeah.
Well, a dock.
It was
well, technically, right?
I found out about it when I watched 1941 starring John Belushi and everything. And Dan Aykroyd. Yeah, I was like, you know what? What did this actually happen? And then, long behold.
Turns out it did.
And that attack only did $500 worth of damage. So whoever was behind that gun,
I know.
they need to work on their
We barely
aim.
came back from it. They crippled us. All right, man. We got away lucky.
Yeah, they knocked out some shrubs or something.
Yeah, they couldn't walk to the sailboat. That was still anchored on the other half of the dock.
And that dock took a good wallop.
Some shrubberies. You shall get me a shrubbery, or I shall say knee. Sorry, it just reminded me of that. I couldn't help myself.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you better.
Knights of Knee?
Yeah. I'll stop there. Sorry.
We
Not
are
sorry,
the knights who
actually.
say knee. All right. So what happened? Everybody was on edge, and on the 25th at 2:25 a.m., air raids sounded throughout Los Angeles County, and a blackout was ordered. At 3:16 a.m., the 37th Coast Artillery Brigade began firing 50 caliber machine guns and 12-pound anti-aircraft shells into the air. Over 1,400 shells were fired, and the air barrage continued until 4:14 in the morning. The all clear was sounded and the blackout was lifted at 7:21 a.m. And just to sort of explain the blackout tactics a little bit, this was in the day before they had like infrared and anything like that. So they would find their targets literally by just looking for lights and things. So if it was the dead of night and everybody turned out their lights, it'd be awfully hard to hit their targets. No GPS, no nothing. It was all visual back then. So it was a pretty effective camouflage.
Well, and they had like, spotlights on. It's not like they just rolled out anti-aircraft guns. They were positioned because of the heightened fear of World War II and the attack on Pearl Harbor, a bunch of their ships, trading ships and stuff being attacked. So it's like, there was anti-aircraft guns all up and down the West Coast. They took over Disneyland. They had spotlights.
Oh, yeah.
And anti-aircraft guns in the Disneyland parking lot, right? Because you can't let Disneyland fall.
Yeah.
If Disneyland falls, America's done.
Yeah.
And we all know that.
Well, and we all know that would have to be a main target for the Japanese as well.
There's like these hidden military fortifications up here in the Bay Area. I took Agent Redacted to one of the batteries. There's actually two of them you can visit. And one of them, the battery Spencer, is like right above the Golden Gate Bridge. And you have like these panoramic views and like the perfect picturesque scene. And it's an ideal military location. And there's like just all this leftover, decrepit stuff from that era. There's like poles, like metal poles where they used to mount machine guns. And there's like military buildings. And it's just a lot of fun to like walk around and kind of be a part of that history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of cool to like just kind of imagine like what it must have been back then. You know what I mean? Like what it must have felt like to be a part of that whole ordeal. Cause that was, like, especially this time, like you said, just a couple months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the heightened level of like hysteria must have been at somewhat of a peak at this point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
1,400 rounds sent up, definitely we're on edge.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Kill it.
Whatever.
Kill it.
Kill it now. Burn it with fire. Do everything.
Now with artillery, it's not like, for some reason, when I think of the artillery, I don't know why, but I always think of like the Matrix scene when they're shooting all they're in the like the robots, like they're like just blasting. It's like duk, 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 duk. I was like, it's not like they're loading these shells, right? Like manually stepping back, like everyone's plugging the air is like bang, like fire one off, like reload it. It's not something where it's like, oh yeah, it's a process to load these things and fire them. It's not just someone sitting back like hitting the red triggers, right? Like, but that's what I always picture in my head when I would see the 1,400. I was like, oh yeah, they're sitting there, right? It's like, no, like this is a process that spanned over hours to shoot this many. So when you look at the process to go through it, I'm like, it's actually impressive that they fired this many in that time.
Yeah.
I would absolutely love to have seen it. That would have been just the sheer force of like just seeing that. Like, could you imagine being a business owner and just being like, okay, we're blacked out, like shops all closed, it's just the eruption above you. Oh God, like just is scary but awesome at the same time.
Well, it's not just the eruption above you. Like they're fixating
Sirens
the lights on a single spot in the sky, right? And they're firing. So, like, you'd be looking, you're like, well, they're shooting at something, right?
Yeah,
like,
and I'm under it. Yeah, fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially as a civilian, you see that kind of a reaction, and you got to think it's for some reason. It's not for nothing. We're under attack.
Yeah, one of the explanations for this one is that it was just wartime jitters. Somebody got they got over anxious on their trigger, they fired something, and then everybody started lighting up the sky. But if you look at the picture, the spotlights are all focused on one area, one object. So if it was just wartime jitters, you wouldn't have all those spotlights shining on the same thing. And also, you wouldn't have all the witnesses who described what they did, which I'll get to in a little bit later. I have some witness statements. Unfortunately, in this case, we only have to go on mostly on what the newspaper said, but it's better than nothing. We didn't have Project Blue Book or anything like that collecting witness statements back then.
I'm surprised there were any witnesses, actually, if you think about it, because they had all these like drills, like air raid drills, and you think people would actually do the opposite. They would hide if there was an attack.
Well, a lot of the witnesses were civilian air wardens, like volunteers who would volunteer to like watch the skies and to raise alarms and that kind of thing. There were a lot of people in their cars, and when the lights out was ordered, you were supposed to pull over your car and turn off the lights and not move until, you know, it was lifted, or you could probably get out of your car, but, you know, stuff like that. So there were a lot of people, and plus, you imagine the racket this would have made. You're not sleeping through that. So even if it's in the middle of the night, you're waking up and you're going to enjoy the show. And a lot of people went out just to see all the, you know, fireworks and stuff going off. It was probably quite a show.
I would have been hunkered down somewhere. I don't know. I would not have been a witness.
There's always that one person, though, or that one group of people that will go against what you're supposed to do, right? I mean, look at Florida.
Hey, man, rules are made to be broken.
You know, it's not like this is a small town. It's LA. Like there was 1.5 million people living there at the time. Like it's still a city. It's not like, you know, it's a country in 1940. There was people everywhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is one of the remarkable things about this case. So many cases are, you know, out in the middle of nowhere, and there's just a handful of witnesses. This case probably has the only other case I can think of off the top of my head that might have as many witnesses is maybe something like the Phoenix Lights or something like that, where you have an entire, you know, metropolis that witnessed it.
I was going to kind of comment on the picture because we had talked about that picture that was released by the LA Times, I believe, right?
Yeah,
the next
go for
day.
it.
And well, I mean, like, I find that picture pretty damn compelling because the thing is, you hear this, like, you hear that, like, the picture had been modified or altered to make it, like, you know, look a little better, I guess you'd say, whatever. But I've seen what I think is the original and the modified version. I mean, they're not that different. I mean, the original version still looks like there's something in the spotlight that they're fixating on. You know what I mean? And like, that's one of the things that really, to me, like, is very compelling. And it makes me really kind of think, what the heck were they shooting at? Because I mean, you've heard this before, like probably most people have, like, that are familiar with this case. If it was a weather balloon, that thing would be vaporized and it would have been gone in a matter of seconds. You know, I would think, right?
They say, like, I think that gives credit to this case because the military has come out and said it was in fact something. So they've never said that these lights weren't pointed at nothing. It was hysteria. They've said these lights were pointed at something. That thing happened to be an indestructible weather balloon that we fired 1,400 shells at and couldn't take out of the sky.
Yeah, it's 10 different lights pointing at it, and you have different positions all fixating it. And that day and time, nobody's communicating as one. They're just hearing fire or probably seeing somebody shoot from across the way, fixating on that position and creating that cone of fire. And yeah, just it's not for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Either it was something that was impervious to those rounds or what have you, or our military was woefully untrained.
Well,
whatever,
there's a lot of factors that go into it, and like, you know, besides being jumpy, is you could argue that, but we also had radar at that time, and there's, you know, there are people that have, you know, not disputed, but the fact that our radar system was kind of sketchy at that time. It wasn't like foolproof.
Yeah.
There was actually like I forgot, one of the
Robert
British
Watson
pioneers.
Watts.
Yeah. When he was saying it was just gravely unsuitable. That was the quote.
That was one of his quotes after doing the investigation that he did for our like early warning systems and our radar systems were actually happened before this, earlier in 1942, I believe. But yeah, that was one of his quotes, and he said that, and one of the other ones was it was in grave danger of plotting false tracks. That's a direct quote from his report. So like that kind of thing, I don't know. It's like all right, well, I mean, maybe our radar systems were very subpar, and possibly they could have had false tracks or what have you. But still, I mean, you can't deny the reaction
so did their
from the people on the
eyes. So
ground.
did everyone's eyes at the same time.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
that's what I was going to get at, is that, but at the end, it still doesn't describe what we all like witnessed through the picture and what they saw.
The reaction on the ground was something completely different. You know what I mean?
Well, the fact that the military admits that it was picked up on radar and it was seen from the ground by eyewitnesses It's
By
not
three
like
different
you can't say
installations,
to
right?
me afterwards, like, hey, our radar was no good. Like, it can't be trusted. I was like, yeah, but it's corroborated with other evidence. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like maybe our radar wasn't up to par and sometimes, did these things, but you have two separate things that weren't affected by each other that are saying, hey, there's something up there. Radar and people and lights and people shooting at it.
Yeah. Well, not to mention the radar readings came from three different separate installations.
Yes. Yeah.
And they all, I'm not an expert on radar. I have no idea to be quite, I have a little bit of an idea how it works, but like I'm no expert. So I don't know how these things might happen, but three different installations that were seeing the same thing, tracking the same thing. I don't know, man. I don't know if that sounds like a false positive or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It seems unlikely that they would all get a false return. And the military actually contradicted itself right away as well. The Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, he actually held a press conference and he said the whole thing was just a case of war nerves, like a false alarm. But we also have a declassified memo from General George C. Marshall. He said that there were actually airplanes in the air, and that he thought that it might have been some kind of enemy diversion using like commercial airplanes as a psychological warfare to create a panic or something like that. And there's some other stuff that the military said, but in essence, they contradicted themselves pretty much right away. So what was really happening? Was it, some Japanese agents who took off in some Cessnas, or,
listen, if Japanese Cessnas can withstand 1,400 mortar shells, they should just outfit all their airplanes with whatever their commercial jets are.
Yes.
To me, I'm like, it makes sense that they would want to downplay this situation because you have a nation on edge, right? Like there's at this point, it's the war isn't guaranteed won. Like it's not like they're like, hey, we won this. You're in the fight right now. Everyone's on high alert. You're not just going to be like, hey, listen, we saw something last night. We fired everything we shot at. It was ineffective and it took off. We don't know what it was. We'll let you guys, we'll give you an update when we know. Like, you're not going to do that. It's not instilling confidence. It's going to, instill fear in people in times of war. So of course you're going to be like, our bad. Like, there's nothing. Like you obviously shot the mortar shells off. So you got to say something. But you're not going to be like, oh yeah, it was probably just some invincible commercial crafts or something. I don't know. Like you're going to downplay this.
It was moving too at such a slow rate. I don't even think plane could travel at the rate of speed it was going. I mean, that thing was.
But maybe a UFO could.
Yeah, exactly.
Really drifting.
Well, yeah. The only thing we had at the time, and still to my knowledge, outside of helicopters, would be some kind of dirigible, like a balloon or a hot air balloon. Or a blimp or something like that could travel that slowly.
But again, to survive all those rounds, you know what I mean? I mean, even if it was, give it the challenge that it's going at a vertical and horizontal, because, balloons float up. I mean, what the hell is that going to do? But that thing stayed intact. And it was reported that it took direct hits at points. So, that's a tough-ass balloon. Get me in that thing.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, remember the Hindenburg disaster? Like, you think if we would have hit one with a mortar shell, that thing would have been lit up the sky.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And the Hindenburg was supposed to have been, like, ignited through, like, static charge or something like that, right?
Yeah. Now imagine hit that thing with a direct shot of a mortar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And shoot that fucker with a giant round and see what happens.
And also, like, I believe you would have had better pictures of a fucking giant ass blimp floating. like you would have seen
Over
it
one
like
of the biggest cities on the West Coast.
Yeah, it would have just been blown apart.
Yeah, and you would hope that the military would be able to identify correctly a weather balloon or a blimp, right? Not expend.
What was the
all
first year of the Goodyear blimp? Have we made sure we cross-reference to make sure there's no chance that this was the first mistaken identity of the Goodyear blimp?
Yeah, right.
No, I never looked into that, but I will right now.
They used it's surprisingly that thing, Goodyear blimps have been up for quite a while.
Since 1917. So we can't even cancel out the Goodyear blimp.
Yeah. But that's
Damn.
a good year, man. That's I think solid. If it took all that,
Yeah.
There's this old joke. What do you do with 365 used condoms?
oh no.
Anybody know?
I could think of a couple of things, but I don't know this joke.
You recycle them into a tire and call it a good year.
Oh, nice.
Oh, there you
Nice.
I might edit that one out. That might be a bit much.
go. No, you gotta leave it.
Don't do it. Don't do it. That was a good one. That's a solid one right there.
Yeah, it's not mine. I think I got that from some book or something. I don't remember. But yeah, so the interesting thing, like I think Adrian Kruger was saying, this thing moved really slowly. It went from about Santa Monica to Long Beach, which is more or less 20 miles, and it took about 30 minutes, give or take, to make that distance. So we're talking about like a really slow rate of travel, and that's what I could find. But I also found references, like there was a news report from I think CBS the next morning that talked about it coming back after that, or going away and coming back, but I didn't catch too many details on that, like as far as, you know, specifically what time everything happened. But it appears to have moved down the coast very, very slowly, and the whole time they were bombarding it with shells, and witnesses on the ground even said they saw the shells hitting it to no effect, which is really weird. It's hard to wrap your head around that. Like, what could cause that? But then I started thinking, what if it was something like, you know, we have talked previously on the show about something like an Alcubierre drive, which would bend space-time around the spaceship, and that's how you could overcome, you know, the light speed barrier, essentially. If you had something like that, then a missile or a shell, well, you could just bend that energy around the ship as well, and you would be invulnerable to that kind of an attack. So maybe it was something like that. Who knows? But witnesses did say they saw it getting hit, and they saw a solid metallic craft, not some kind of balloon or weather balloon or something like that, which, you know, as ridiculous as that seems, I suppose they could have missed 1,400 times, you know?
Well, and isn't a weather balloon always the excuse?
Yeah. Yeah,
Not
pretty
always,
much.
but in too many cases, like, oh, no, don't worry about it. It's a weather balloon.
Well, it's
Like,
that or Venus and Gatorade.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my
what
favorite
Venus always getting in the way.
My favorite Venus explanation is the Illinois 2000 triangles, which you could say you don't believe the
Yeah.
witnesses. You could say whatever you want, but to say that these football field sized triangles are just the planet Venus is just a little bit much. That's my personal favorite
Yeah,
one.
it's almost like insulting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what the hell are you talking about, man? Like, no, that doesn't line up at all with what people are describing. No.
Well, that's the same with this case here, right? It's like to come and say like this was a weather balloon. It's like, how did it not, like, I don't know how weather balloons work. I'm not a scientist, but I would coat my tanks in weather balloons if this is how they
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
They just
it's
deflect
great when
damage.
somebody comes up and tells you your eyes are wrong. Your eyes are lying to you. It's like, fuck you. Hey, fuck you.
Beyond just this one object, there were some listening posts that detected 5 light airplanes, but supposedly nothing was sent up to intercept them, and we don't really know what those light craft might have been. They could have just been small airplane. People fly around in small airplanes. They did then, and they still do today. So it could have just been some sort of civilian, people flying around in their private aircraft. We don't know.
Oh, yeah. That poor son of a bitch just calmly going through the sky, just chilling out. And then all suddenly everybody's trying to kill you from down below. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you imagine? You're flying from, from wherever to wherever, and then the whole sky just lights up. You're, oh my God.
Yeah.
Stay out of the light.
Why? Yeah.
And then, but to come out of it unscathed and just fine, you'd be like, well, holy shit. I used all my dumb luck that moment.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That would have sucked so freaking bad. As just like a regular commercial, like pilot, whatever.
And that's when I started drinking. It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah. So other witnesses reported lighted objects in groups of 3 that resembled flares and chains of lights that looked like illuminated kites. So again, we have, other descriptions of things that may or may not be related to the one object that we know for a fact was being bombarded because we have a picture of it. But this is not unusual in UFO cases to see multiple different types of craft flying around an area. One thing that I wonder about is that shrapnel and even dud shells were found all over the place, all over the city. They damaged cars and property. They even allegedly injured or killed a few cows, which is, kind of sad because California is the land of happy cows, supposedly. But one thing I wonder is, what if the shells actually, the shrapnel or whatever, was ricocheting off of this object or other objects, and that's how it was, ricocheting back. But then again, maybe if you're just lighting up the entire sky, it's pretty much inevitable that you're going to get some shrapnel all over the place.
Yeah, it's definitely called swinging for the fences there.
Yeah. I have a quote here from the Long Beach Independent. There is a mysterious reticence about the whole affair, and it appears some form of censorship is trying to halt discussion of the matter. Although it was red-hot news, not one national radio commentator gave it more than passing mention. This is the kind of reticence that is making the American people gravely suspect the motives and competence of those whom they have charged with the conduct of war. And it wasn't just them. A lot of newspapers, like the Los Angeles Times with that famous, the famous front page photo, one of the columns on that front page is about, they suspect the government basically covering something up. So it literally the next day, immediately, right away, a cover-up was suspected by everybody pretty much, because what the government was telling us did not match what people were reporting at all.
Well, that's not a new thing. You know what I mean?
Nope.
Like, I don't know, but like in American history, by the time, like 1913 or so came around, like most of the newspapers were owned by a few select individuals, and the fix was kind of in. That's one reason, and this is completely unrelated, but that's one reason why, like, the monetary system that we have right now was enacted,
Yeah.
with so control of information, you know what I mean?
Now, I did read.
Sorry, that's a little side tangent.
A little far afield. We won't go down, that route. That'll be a whole other episode. I read an analysis.
Take over the episode, but
yeah, I read an analysis by Bruce Maccabee, who's like a physicist type dude, and he came to the conclusion that based on the data, like the photograph and everything else, he couldn't come to a conclusion about the size of the object in the photograph. If maybe we had multiple photographs from different angles or whatever, but this is one thing that a lot of people try to do is they'll say, okay, we have this picture. Can we tell how big the object is? The sad answer is no, we can't, unfortunately. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah. Well,
Now,
it's kind of funny because I'm sorry, go ahead.
I had to look something up because when you said that, like, this shrapnel and stuff was, causing damage and stuff, because I'm not, I don't really know how artillery works. I just always assumed it was like it's just a giant gun.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. It's a giant gun. Shoots a giant bullet. So the thing for me is, I'm like, in order for you to get shrapnel, either some of these weren't shooting these
right
far enough, and they were actually lobbing them back and, basically friendly fire, or like you said, these were hitting something and coming back down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
so
some of the shrapnel areas were actually reported to have been in like very specific areas, like right under where that light, all those like different searchlights were all pointing. You know what I mean? So it's like, well, I mean, like, yeah, there are flak guns that were being shot, but there also were like straight up anti-air, cannons that were being used as well.
Yeah.
And like not all of them just like explode in the air at a certain distance. Some of them do, like the flak guns do, but not all of them do. So like, what were they hitting? Because some of them seem to have been hitting something.
Dude, and they have like a range of 19 miles, 155 millimeter howitzer. I don't know if that's what they were using, but 19 miles and 14 miles. So these things would soar.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. Like, so it's like either they're really undershooting and, it'd be like, hey guys, you have no business even firing at this thing because you're lobbing it down, missing.
Who the hell put you behind the gun?
Or they're like, obviously someone's spotting this thing of seeing, like, I don't think you would just aim up and shoot. Like, obviously they would have some engaging distance of being like, okay, yes, this is safe to fire. Like you're not just going to fire shots up in the air knowing like, hey, this thing's going to just land, probably 20 miles short, but hopefully it scares this airplane. like you're gonna fire to hit it. So it makes sense that this shrapnel would more than likely be from something hitting this object and then coming back down below.
And more likely killing your own civilian.
Yeah.
Person you're trying to protect. I mean, if you can look at a few photos of people that are like on their knees trying to pick up some of the debris from, or like trying to dig it out from the ground. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, if it was hitting something in it or exploded in air, I wouldn't think it would come back and hit the ground with such force. So if it was a ricochet, though, I could see that coming down in more velocity, and like it punctured a sidewalk, and like you can see a dude's elbow deep into the ground trying to pull up whatever the hell it is.
Mm-hmm.
So
I remember seeing that picture. Yeah,
that would be crazy if you were seeing like rounds actually skip off it like a tank.
What I wouldn't give to be there in the moment, experiencing this for myself. You know what I mean? If I had a time machine or something. Sometimes I just sit there and daydream about that kind of shit with some of these cases. You know what I mean?
Agree. Yeah. Or the photos that weren't developed, or like maybe some footage that just was, shot, and they're like, nah, it's worthless. They already have the photo they want. So
I think it might be cool to go back in time as yourself.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case in somebody's basement.
Yeah. End up in the sky, and then they start shooting you. It was you all along.
That explains it.
There we go. End of case. We got it. We solved it, you guys.
Predestination.
I did read one tongue-in-cheek.
Sorry, go ahead, Agent Anderson.
Yeah, I did read one tongue-in-cheek theory on Above Top Secret about one person posted. They said maybe it was people like middle-class people from the future, because there's no more war, so they have to come back to the past to actually see war as like a form of entertainment or something. It's like, why not?
Yeah.
It's a Disney ride from the future, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
It all makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, it's far in the future. Like Elon Musk has provided this service to everybody after he finished Starlink and all the different rides to space and stuff like that. He tackled time travel.
Well, Elon says we're never going to Mars.
And only the
though.
rich get to do it.
He says we aren't going to Mars because we're not.
Did he?
We don't. Yeah, because we're not populating the planet anymore. We have infertility rates are negative in some countries. So he's like, we'll never get to Mars. You guys need to. You guys need to start having more kids.
Yeah, get busy, baby. Listen.
I can get on board with that. Yeah.
I don't know. I think I got to be honest. I think the human race would have to advance so much in order to become a species that is without war, because we have so many differences, and that's a good thing. And it's also a bad thing too. I don't know where really to land on this subject, but I think it's going to take quite some time for the human race to get into that mode, be advanced, that advanced. You know what I mean?
I have a couple of witness statements here. This one's from a newspaper. And this was a lady named Katie, who was an air raid supervisor in her district. She was a volunteer, and she said, "It was huge. It was just enormous, and it was practically right over my house. I had never seen anything like it in my life. It was just hovering there in the sky and hardly moving at all. It was a lovely pale orange and about the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. I could see it perfectly because it was very close. It was big." And
that's what she said.
Oh God, I was
I win,
back.
dude.
I'm sorry. We all wanted to say
it. You're welcome.
Oh yeah, all right. I hadn't even thought of that. I should have warned everybody. All right.
Sorry to interrupt. I couldn't help myself. Come on, man. With a setup like that, how could I help myself?
All right.
Yeah, it was. You had to.
It was a slam dunk waiting to happen.
I was compelled by my morals.
All right. She also said, "They sent fighter planes up and I watched them in groups approach it and then turn away. There they were shooting at it, but it didn't seem to matter." Now this quote's interesting because other people also reported this, but officially, including an official memo sent to the president, said that they did not send any planes up. So which is it? Did those people see planes sent up, or were they just imagining that? It's hard to imagine that they would be imagining that, but it's one of those strange things. It's one of the inconsistencies in this case. It could be, what I'm guessing is maybe because of how ineffective our defenses were. Like if you're reporting to your supervisor and you're, like let's say you're middle management, like a general, and you're reporting to the president, and you're like, hey, no, we didn't send up any airplanes to shoot at it, because you don't want to admit failure. Maybe it's something like that. I don't know. But it's a very strange thing. But she continues, she says, it was like the 4th of July, but much louder. They were firing like crazy, but they couldn't touch it. And that was really interesting because it matches what some other people say. And it wasn't just like your typical pedestrian flying saucer or whatever, but actually was like self-illuminated. And again, there are blimps at night are self-illuminated. So maybe it was just an indestructible blimp, right? But yeah, if you dig through, some newspapers of the time, you can find a lot of anecdotes like that. People describing what they saw. People described like, V-shaped formations, big objects, small objects, and all sorts of different things. The only document we have released that I'm aware of that's we know for 100% is a fact was it was a report from General George Marshall to President Roosevelt. And in the memo or whatever it was, he says he has some points. He has 6 points. He says, number 1, the unidentified airplanes other than American Army or Navy planes were probably over Los Angeles and were fired on by elements of the 37th California Brigade. These units expended 1,430 rounds of ammunition. As many as 15 airplanes may have been involved, flying at various speeds from what is officially reported from being very slow to in excess of 200 miles an hour and at elevations from 9,000 to 18,000 feet. 3, no bombs were dropped. 4, no casualties. 5, no planes were shot down. And 6, no American Army or Navy planes were in action. So that's the only official document, but I did find on MUFON.com, in the MUFON Journal, I found an article about some leaked documents that may or may not be genuine. They appear to be genuine, but we don't know for sure that they are. But if these things are real, it's kind of as close to a smoking gun as you're going to get. In these documents, which were mostly between presidents and their advisors or their military generals, they talk about the U.S. military recovering 2 craft in this event, and they believe these craft to be of interplanetary origin. And they also yeah, I know, right? They also talk about a special committee on non-terrestrial science and technology, which, to my knowledge, has not been admitted to this day that they really have something like that. I mean, they have, like Project Blue Book that we know about, but not something that's for, specifically communicating or studying aliens, right? It's all very hush-hush. So this was from the collection of somebody named Timothy Cooper, a former Marine, who had requested documents through the FOIA. And I won't go through all that stuff. I'll just go over the documents real quick. So the next document we have is from 2 days later, and it's a memo from President Roosevelt to General Marshall. And it's basically telling him to not tell the Russians about this, because Marshall was wondering, hey, should we share this information with our buddies, the Russians? At this time, this is before the Cold War, so we were still friends with them back then. And this one's really interesting because, well, I'll just read the first sentence. I have considered the disposition of the material in possession of the Army that may be of great significance toward the development of a super weapon of war. So it's a short little memo, but it doesn't specifically say, UFOs. But if you put it in the context of when the memo was sent, which is 2 days after this, and what they're talking about, it sure as heck seems like they're talking about maybe, some alien technology that they may have captured from the Battle of Los Angeles. We don't know, but we can hope that that's the case, or at least imagine that it might be. And it also authorizes Dr. Vannevar Bush, which that's a whole other topic in and of itself, that fella, but authorizes him to proceed with the project without further delay. It doesn't really say what the project's focus is. All right, so 2 weeks later, on March 5th, Marshall responds with a detailed memo declaring that he had established a review of unconventional aerial phenomenon going back to 1897. And this particular memo it's kind of hard to read in certain places, but it talks about details about the recovery of two objects associated with the Battle of Los Angeles. And then we have a fourth one that pertains to this case. This is 2 years later, in 1944. He wrote a memo, President Roosevelt wrote a memo to the Special Committee on Non-Terrestrial Science and Technology. And it was apparently a reply to an earlier request for money and possibly for a project that was trying to reverse engineer UFO technology, but it doesn't say that explicitly. We don't know for sure, but it sure sounds really interesting. And it's classified double top secret, which at first, like, wait a minute, there's no such thing as double top secret, but apparently there was. And you can find examples.
Just wait till you hear about triple top secret.
I know, right? Just wait. But yeah, so this one, it's like I said, there are examples in the Library of Congress of double top secret, but it's not like a super common thing. And you might have to ask a historian more about that particular point. All right, and then the last one is from Vannevar Bush to President Harry Truman, and this was apparently Vannevar Bush wanted to kind of brief President Truman on what the situation was. And he's telling him about wartime recoveries and encouraging the implementation of an aggressive reverse engineering program. It's a 2-page letter, and it clearly states that it will be in the United States' best interests to discover the technology and apply it to achieve a higher standard of living in the United States. So other than the first one, the remaining 4, we're not entirely sure what the authenticity of these are. They could be hoax. They may or may not be. We're not sure. They were found in a collection of this guy's letters. What was that guy's name again? Oh yeah, Timothy Cooper. So this was found in Timothy Cooper's collection of documents. We're not 100% sure that they're authentic, which is maybe why I haven't heard of them before, but they appear to be authentic. And for anybody who wants to try to look up more on these themselves, we're talking about February 26, 1942, from George Marshall to Franklin Roosevelt, a memorandum for the president. February 27th, 1942, Franklin Roosevelt to George Marshall, memorandum for the Chief of Staff of the Army. March 5th, 1942, George Marshall to Franklin Roosevelt, memorandum for the president. And February 24th, 1944, Franklin Roosevelt to the Special Committee on Non-Terrestrial Science and Technology, memorandum for the Special Committee on Non-Terrestrial Science and Technology. And July 5th, 1944, Vannevar Bush to Harry Truman, letter of transmittal. So if you Google this stuff, you can find these documents online and read them for yourself. As to whether or not they are genuine, I have no idea, but they seem very, very compelling.
You know what I think it was?
What's that?
And maybe this is a little bit early on in the war for this, but I think it might have been the Die Glocke.
Oh, Die Glocke.
Die Glocke.
Well, that's a whole other thing.
Well, you know what, like, to be honest, this point, with what we know about Germany and like them kind of looking into the occult and stuff like that, like maybe it's not out of the question to think that the reason why they were interested in these flying objects is because they've heard that the Germans were potentially already delving into this stuff, right? You know, there's people after the war that have pointed to Annie Jacobs. She wrote the book Area 51. She says that while we were doing Operation High Jump after the war, and grabbing all the V-2 rocket scientists that in Operation Osavayakim, where the Russians were grabbing their scientists, that they were going after aerospace engineers. And, you know, and there's certain German engineers and stuff that went missing after the war and were never seen from again. And she kind of alludes that perhaps Russia was interested in seizing these crafts that were either being built or experimented on or tested by the Germans. So maybe this is something that wasn't ready for war, but it was a test at the time, right? Like,
yeah, something that was experimental that they may have been trying to use or something like that.
Exactly.
And like either way, whichever side may have absorbed this technology, potentially, what have you, or absorbed the scientists that were involved, you wouldn't hear nothing about it. You know what I mean? There's probably going to be no public information available on it. So it's one of those things where it's like, well, shit, your guess is as good as mine. You know what I mean? Like, Who knows what happened with that kind of technology, even if it was a real thing, which some people think it wasn't. Some people think it is. But I tend to be on the side where I think it is. You know what I mean? Like, I think they were doing something, you know?
Yeah, and just as an aside,
a ton of evidence.
Just as an aside, anybody interested in Diglaka, Operation High Jump, Operation Osavayakim, is that how you say it? Diglaka, Alien Theorists Theorizing, they do have episodes on all that stuff, so you should definitely check them out because they're really good, actually. A lot of good stuff in there. Just to kind of interrupt there.
Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, no problem. All right. I don't know. What do you guys have else on this? Because I have a couple more witness statements I'd like to go over.
I was just thinking to myself, kind of in my head, I wonder what the Japanese thought about all of this. There's no way, it's going to be kept under wraps. It's in the papers. It's in the Times. So what kind of intel, I'm wondering, did they have? And what did they think about this whole situation?
It was Japanese lanterns.
There could have been one or two things they were thinking of, like, oh, wow, they really responded, well, look at they shot a shitload of rounds up there in a moment's notice. Or they were like, holy shit, they really suck. Their aim is terrible. They couldn't hit shit right in front of them. So.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? I mean, depending on what the actual reality of the situation is,
Well, they might not have landed in California.
Other than that, I don't really have any.
Yeah, they might not have landed in California, but 4 months later, they actually landed in Alaska. Now, it was a small indigenous island, like a little farming community, but still there was technically an occupation, a brief occupation.
They took over a little farm, huh?
Yeah, a little fishing village.
All right.
We did it, you guys.
We've conquered
wasn't that
America.
like one submarine? Wait, like who was when they... Prior to the event of what we were talking about that night, was it just one ship that was firing upon us at that oil, factory, or was it?
Yeah, I think it was a single sub.
Was he supposed to test out the defense, or to see if we gave a shit, or
it kind of makes you wonder?
Did he get wrong intel? Was he like the only guy to show up to the party? He's like, wait, I thought we were all doing this. What the hell? Like, I'm taking the battle to them. He's just a rogue agent for Japan.
Yeah, that kind of make me wonder, like why did they attack? Like, was it part of a diversion that actually like nothing ever came to fruition because of it, or like were they actually thinking that they could have destroyed that installation with one sub, which they obviously didn't.
Why not stay? Why not stay and destroy it? Like, it doesn't make sense. You had people, Japanese pilots, suicide bombing ships in Pearl Harbor, and you have these guys taking couple pot shots at a dock and then leaving, peacing out. Like it's a weird one for me. But I mean, it's weird that they would just do that and they're like, all right, you see that we got like 6 rounds off, let's peace.
Yeah, what was it? Just like an overzealous captain, like submarine captain that like decided to take the opportunity potentially that presented itself to him. Did they find themselves like off course and like all of a sudden they're on the west coast of the United States? Like, oh shit, I didn't know. All right, we weren't supposed to be here so soon.
Now hear me out.
I know that there's a target.
Shoot them. Let's shoot at them. We'll bail and we'll be heroes. Okay, who else fucking did this? No one. Yeah, that's what I thought. Like,
could be.
But I digress. I mean, yeah. Other than that, sorry to steer us off course there, but
we're always off course half the time. Who cares?
I know, right?
That's part of the fun.
We're blindfolded behind a car.
There's a local myth in the Santa Barbara area that the captain of the submarine was a disgruntled worker from that area. He worked at those oil fields, so he wanted to come back and shoot a couple of shells off at it. But it's completely unsubstantiated. There's really no way to prove it at all. It's just one of these local myth kind of a things, according to the internet,
I would buy into that because it's like what's the installation? Like what's the value of this target to take you obviously. Like, you think if you were ordered to destroy it, you would have stayed and kept firing at it.
Right. Yeah.
So
probably got orders. He's like, where are you? Sub, whatever number. And he's like, I'm shooting at LA right now. Or, wait, what? No, you fucking idiot. Get out of there.
That's not LA. That's Santa Barbara.
No, or Santa Barbara, wherever the hell you are. Get the hell out of there. It makes you wonder what other ships they had just off the distance, just kind of floating there. waiting for us.
They weren't attacked or anything, the Japanese submarine. Nobody attacked them. Nobody tried to drop bombs
We
on
didn't
them.
care.
So it is kind of
Like,
strange
alright.
that they didn't stick around to actually cause damage. They just let off some shells and then they just pieced out. It's a little weird.
Yeah, it was like 20 minutes or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I think 1941 did it right. So
I still haven't seen that movie.
if you guys
by the
haven't
way.
seen that movie,
No.
you should definitely watch it. Oh wow,
Something to do.
Damn.
Something to do, yeah.
By the
you
way,
should do it.
have you guys, I didn't even know like that there was a Battle of Los, I don't pay attention much to movies. Like I watch some movies and stuff, you know, I didn't even know that there was a Battle of Los Angeles movie. I knew for sure that there was a Battle of Los Angeles album by Rage Against the Machine. I remember when that came out.
I
But,
remember, yeah, I saw that one, the one that you're talking about in theaters years
Awesome,
ago.
awesome album. I don't agree with their politics in any way, shape, or form, but awesome album.
Terrible movie.
What was it?
Who's it? I think it's Aaron Eckhart.
Was the movie about
Starring-
like an alien invasion or something like that? It seems like to me.
Yeah, full on. I kind
but
of wish
it-
they would have just. It would have been cool to do like a suspenseful movie about this event rather than like a full sci-fi approach of like they actually get, we get a full on invasion.
Mm-hmm.
I just
Yeah.
remember it not being the best movie.
Well, that reminds me of a movie I did see called The Vast of Night. It's on Amazon Prime if you have that. And it takes place like in the 50s, and they do a really good job of setting it into like small town America with like the way people dress and the way they talk and everything. And it's about kind of about UFO sighting type stuff. I don't want to say any more than that because I don't want to give spoilers, but it's a really,
what is it called again? I don't think I've seen that.
it's called The Vast of Night. It's kind of a slow pace, but
The Vast of Night.
yeah, they do a really good job of like building the atmosphere of the movie. And it's sort of around the idea of some sort of UFO kind of a thing, but you never actually even see the UFO in the movie. It's the exact opposite of, like a, Independence Day kind of a thing.
You could take this story and make it a movie as is and just leave the mystery up to the viewer of like,
Oh yeah.
do you believe this, that they fired on this balloon for 4 hours and couldn't bring it down and consistently saw it and it just continued to drift?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right? Like,
Mhm.
Just terrible aim that night.
That
Just
sounds legit.
absolutely just blind.
Oh, there's plenty of material there to work with.
Yeah.
Plenty.
I took all kinds of notes, like newspaper articles and all kinds of cool stuff, but I don't know if I want to read all that much, but I do have a couple of witness statements. I want to get to at least one of those because they were taken after the fact of people who were there at the time. And for me, the witness statements are, rather than going to what like a newspaper or what somebody says about it, like their opinion about it, going to the direct witness statements is always your best bet to see what the people who were there, what did they say about it? Does that match up with the official explanation, or does that match up with what the newspapers are even saying? Because unfortunately, in this case, a lot of the information we have does come from newspapers. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And I found over my time doing the show, I found that newspapers can sometimes be highly unreliable. They tend to exaggerate or embellish facts a lot of the time. Not always, but they do sometimes.
yeah, I think especially back in the day, like at this time where it's like, one news article is writing an article based on another article, right? And it's picking up the story, right? It's like you add a detail here or there, take a liberty, then things change in a hurry, right? It turns into telephone very quickly.
But all right. I have this here from HC. That's the abbreviation. I don't know what the real name is, but he says, I'm a World War II veteran. Just thought I'd let you know that I was an eyewitness to the event back in February of 1942. I was 14 at the time, living in Adams and Crenshaw area of Los Angeles. My family and I observed the entire episode through the large bay window of our home facing west. The air raid sirens awoke us at 2 a.m. There was a period of silence following that, then the thumping of anti-aircraft fire. The northwest sky was lit up with bursting shells and searchlights. The action was moving south along the coastline. I remember distinctly the convergence of searchlights reflecting off the bottom of some kind of slow-moving objects, apparently flying in formation. They seemed to be completely oblivious and impervious to the shells exploding around them. I was quite the aviation buff back then, as I am now, but I must admit that I had a devil of a time trying to identify the objects. What with the awe, excitement, and speculation of the moment, the bursting shells, tracers, etc., I was surprised in the days that followed to discover that with all the aggressive firepower, there was no evidence that we had brought anything down. I lived on Virginia Road, half a block south of West Adams Boulevard and 1/4 mile south of what is now the Interstate 10 Santa Monica Freeway, about 5.5 miles southwest of what is now the Los Angeles Civic Center, and approximately 10.5 miles due east of the Pacific coastline of Santa Monica. We were looking in a westward direction from our large living room bay window, which gave us an unobstructed panorama of view facing the northwest, west and southwest. We then went to our south-facing kitchen and porch windows to observe the action where it culminated in the south. Ergo, the action followed the coastline. It could have been 2 or 3 or up to 6 miles away. I can't recall exactly since it occurred so long ago, but I strongly remember the searchlights converging on the bottoms of the reddish objects flying in formation. And this actually reminds me of something I was reading earlier. One of the newspapers talks about there was actually an aircraft somewhere in Los Angeles, or a police station reported finding a downed aircraft somewhere in the city. I forget the exact street, but it said the exact street. And there's also reports of police closing off that area. But this kind of stuff, I think it was maybe covered up or something, because I couldn't find any mention of it anywhere else. And it just kind of makes you wonder, where does that come from? Did a newspaper just kind of invent that? Or was that like a real police report? I don't know. I couldn't figure out how to track anything else down around that. But I find it incredibly compelling because it does sort of go along with some of the other discussions I've seen, that being that, maybe we did down something and we did find something, or maybe it was nothing at all. I don't know, but it was, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the thing about like this time period too, is like nowadays there's going to be very few people, if any, that are going to be still alive that witnessed this firsthand. You know what I mean? So like the only thing you have to really go off of is the testimonies from people that were there at the time that actually chose to make a statement. You know what I mean? And I would imagine most people probably didn't, just because they probably just took it as a potential attack from Japan, or maybe even just a botched response to something that wasn't really there. But like, or a weather balloon, like it was released later on or the next day, right? Or was it the next day? I forget. Oh no, that's right. I'm confusing. I'm confusing the facts here. No, it was what was it? 1948, where former Air Force Major William Goss, I think it was, that was a college professor at that time. By the time he made this report, he made a report on the behalf of the U.S. Air Force about this very incident, and he concluded that it was a weather balloon. Basically, at the end of his report,
those pesky weather balloons.
It's interesting to think, if you look at that and you say like, hey, maybe we did down something and collect it, which would then predate Roswell. If you think, wasn't the Manhattan Project was officially launched in August of that year?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you could say that, like, if that's, we're speculating that we did potentially get something, could we have dropped it, and could that have helped, reverse engineered this stuff to use in the Manhattan Project?
I mean,
I think it's quite likely,
yeah, I could go along with that, because the Manhattan
I'm just looking
Project,
at times. I'm like, the times
yeah, and that the Manhattan Project
kind of line up, right?
It was such a leap forward in technology. It was not like a linear progression. It was like there's a real gap in what we had before, and then all of a sudden, we're splitting the atom with, we didn't even have calculators. It's just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was some sort of drive, like a nuclear drive, that we modified into a bomb.
Yeah.
Well, why would that be our ergo move there right away? No, that's still crazy though. I mean, yeah, that's wild to think about.
Say we would have found like a nuclear drive of some sort, or some kind of advanced drive from an alien species, let's just say. Do you think like through reverse engineering at that time, we probably could not have reverse engineer it and understood everything about it, but maybe we learned enough about it to split the atom. You know what I mean? And You know what I'm
spark the
saying?
fuse and it just blows up. You're like, holy! You're like, well, that'll
Yeah.
be useful.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's go
Wah.
blow some shit up. No, that's. I mean, I just want to, like, wouldn't you? But if we could reverse engineer, I would be putting our resources to. And this, I guess, it just falls under opinion. Like, I would rather it have been for our technology to help, civilians, but also you could help the war effort in a way.
Oh.
But to jump to just let's blow the fucker up.
Well, I mean, at that time and at that period in time, like that's all the effort that we were putting towards everything was to win the war.
Yeah,
you know?
no, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So I mean, I think it's completely reasonable to think that anything we would have learned from something like that would have been put towards that effort. You know what I mean? So I find it completely reasonable to think that, like, if we would have learned something from, a drive like that or technologies that we may have recovered from a fallen spaceship or what have you, then we would have immediately put that towards the war effort, because everything was being put towards a war effort at that point.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, I would say, like, wouldn't you want to suit our fighters with it, or some sort of new way to dispense artillery, or just something
but like
cause
I said,
more damage and get the hell out of there, or put us ahead of their technology, eons ahead.
Like I said, though, I mean, who knows? Like there might have been only so much at that point we could have learned from what we found.
Or,
if it was a
maybe
crash ship.
That tip of the iceberg was splitting the atom at that point. So I could totally get behind that. Yeah. And then that was just like, a fraction of what we know now can be used to wipe out half the world, and then we still have enough left over to, like, improve our situation.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because later statements by some of the scientists that were involved in Manhattan Project, like, some of them thought that, like, making this, like, splitting the atom in particular, may start a chain reaction within the atmosphere that just basically blows up the whole world. And some of them were actually pretty adamant about this. Like, they thought that this might very well happen upon the first test. Yeah, and that's a scary thing to think about, man.
That's a gamble. That is such a gamble.
Well, it's a huge gamble. You're absolutely right. I mean, and then they still went through with it. That's one of the things that, like, I find so wild when it comes to the Manhattan Project. Like, thank God it didn't happen, obviously, but, like, some of the scientists were actually kind of sure that this might happen, and they still went through with it. It's like, I find that crazy. And now, obviously, I'm sure a lot of these scientists were overridden by more powerful forces. You know what I mean? But
I feel like at that point, that was the beginning of the end. I mean, that was the last time we had something of that scale. I don't know what we have now, but, like, what do we have something on par, or if not better than a nuclear weapon?
If we do, I don't think we know about it.
I don't know.
Of course. But I'm just saying, like, not blowing stuff up per se, but, like, putting our mind in a different, like, where's the teleporters, man? Where's my jetpack? Where's my fucking anti-gravity gun?
It's interesting to think, because if we're going to kind of go down this speculating that perhaps if this was the first down craft, and there's not a lot of evidence to support that, but it's fun to think about, because if we think about that, this is potentially the first down craft, and then say we use whatever we get from here to reverse engineer some sort of drive, and we make a nuclear bomb. I find it interesting, if we're going down that theory, to think that as soon as we start firing off these bombs, seemingly is when we start to get a huge jump in UFO activity.
Yes.
So maybe it's something where it's like, we're firing these bombs off, but these people are like, a drive is being, like, we can tell that one of our ships was here because it's firing off.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I could definitely see that. I mean, not only that, but if it was not a downcraft, but it was our technology advancing to that just in a natural progression, then I am a believer in the fact that they would be, hey, they're starting, like, there's a levels or process to this. So our civilization being so advanced compared to theirs is like, they're not ready for us to introduce ourselves. So
could you imagine if this, this spacefaring race that uses nuclear energy for space travel, they comes and they've like, hey, we lost a ship here, and these psychos have just turned our warp drive into bombs. They just blow craters into their planet.
That would scare the shit out of me, and I wouldn't want to contact them. Like,
you'd be like,
so, like, what are they going to do with the stuff that's actually meant for that shit?
That's a good damn point.
So, I mean, that's a scary damn point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they were already observing us, or just observing the missions that they had, strewn out throughout the solar system or the universe.
I'm always terrible at making this comparison, but it's just like that island in like in the middle of fucking nowhere, but like there's no contact with the outside world, and they've made it an absolute effort to preserve their natural like progression as they are so far behind. They're still in the tribe, like mentality, and anybody that steps foot on that island is killed, and anyone and everything they need to live is on that island, so they have no reason to leave.
Are you talking about Sri Lanka?
No, I'm talking. I always
they've literally had no contact with the outside world. I know what you're talking about. And they're still in the Stone Age, like basic rudimentary tools, tribal cultural,
primitive hunter gatherers.
Yes. And the only few people that have like gone out there have been killed. So like there's been missionary, just recently there was, in recent,
it's in
in
India,
the 2000s.
Are you talking about, isn't it around India, around that area? Is that maybe
I believe so.
I know that there are a couple groups of hunter-gatherers. Like there's one or two throughout South America that are so embedded within like the rainforest that
I think it's North Sentinel Island. It's called
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. The Sentinelese. Yes. Yeah. They have made it a complete effort, and we have on our own part to try not to mess with their way of life, barring a few exceptions with, the dumbasses that want to spread religion there or whatever they want. They've been killed basically. And it was, but I mean, why not apply that to a bigger scale, us as a planet and as a whole, saying, yeah, they just will kill you, and they're stuck in their own ways, and they're not ready to accept the fact that there's other civilization, or there's other life out there.
Here's the thing, you look at that tribe, and they're humans, and they don't even know that there's more technologically advanced humans,
right?
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
within contact. Yeah. So if you could just extrapolate that, and we're here, we're enjoying, we're on our computers here playing game, but we don't even realize that there perhaps is more technologically advanced humans out there that are doing the same thing to us. There's a Dr. Mike Masters, and he has a theory that all these aliens and stuff are just versions of humans evolved from the future that just come back, and it's like it is that it's like scientific. Don't interfere. Leave them to their way of life. They're doing their thing. Why not? We do that to other humans.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and a perfect example actually happened during World War II. It was the cult of John Frum, which was I think it was a southwestern Pacific island that we had actually set up. Our Navy and our military had set up a airfield there on their island, and these indigenous people that were already in the area had never come across any technologically advanced race like us. They were very secluded. You know what I mean? And they actually started a religion worshiping those who had come, and John Frum. The theory is that name John Frum came from some American military individual that had introduced themselves. I am John from America, John something from America, and so they thought that his name was John Frum. But they also saw our ships and our planes and stuff, and afterwards. It was I think it was just described as a cargo cult or something like that from these islands. They worshipped this new society that they had come into contact with, and we were so technologically advanced, they didn't understand what they had seen basically. And so they even kept up the airfields afterwards. After we had left, they had built bamboo towers and planes and stuff, and waited for the day where these godlike creatures would come back. And I know that there's, I mean, you can get they're pretty in depth with this stuff, but I don't know I'm just drawing off a memory, you know what I mean? But I find it very interesting, this civilization, this primitive civilization, as we would call it, reacted this way, and it doesn't surprise me a whole lot, but it still kind of is really interesting. They saw us as gods almost, And like, because the amount of technical sophistication that we were able to present, they didn't understand. They just hadn't come into contact with anything like that before, so they thought that we must be something other than they are than they am, whatever, shut up. but I find that that's one of the stories like from World War II that really interests me. Like I find it like very, very compelling that they met us and then we left, and then afterwards, like they still kept up like this whole, like they created like a religious system around what they had experienced. You know what I mean? And I find that most compelling. You know what I mean? Because it's just like, it's amazing that like they would see us and we're humans just like they are.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
it's very thought provoking. It's insane.
Obviously we're more advanced than they are, but like they're still humans, just like they're still like their cranial capacity is just as capable as ours, but they had dealt in different technologies. They had dealt in the technology of survival. You know what I mean? So they didn't understand what we had done and what we had, I don't know. I find it pretty damn interesting that like the way that they reacted, you know what I mean? So like, what if, like what I'm just saying, what if like, there's plenty of like, say if we did find an alien artifact or a crashed aircraft or something like that, how would we as normal individuals that we see, in our own technological sophistication, how would we react to it? You know what I mean? I don't know. I find it very interesting.
This makes me think of I read this book and it was about time travel, and these people from the past, they were about to die, and they would suddenly kind of twist time and space, and they would jump forward in the future hundreds or thousands of years and just be plopped down into a completely different society and culture. And in this book, they very quickly adjusted to this new lifestyle, because you kind of have to as a human, to go on to survive. You have to adapt. So I think, I think about these indigenous people here, and I think if you took them out and you put them in modern society, at first it would be difficult and for them and really scary. But I think at some point they would adapt. And I'm wondering if, as a species, I think we're ready. If that's the case and there's some better technology or the government's hiding something from us, I think we're ready to adapt, and they should go ahead and come clean. Let us know what's going on.
I don't know about that. We can't even decide whether or not face masks are a good idea.
I was going to say, right? There's there has to be a
yeah.
requirement. We got to be 100% all in, or none of us are in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We all are in it, or you can't have that one group that's going to be the chaos, you know what I mean? And the thing that would spread like cancer. So
but that's what you guys said about
the
war.
disagreements between different groups would be the chaos.
Yeah, you can't ever picture like humanity without war. I can never picture a time when presenting aliens, alien technology, that sort of thing is going to be a good time. I don't think there's ever going to be a good time to have the big reveal. So why not now? Why not just do it? Nowish would be nice.
Oh yeah, before my lifetime, that'd be great.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
when I can remember.
For one thing, we'd have to come up with a new show topic. We'll take all the mystery away.
Alien facts. I don't know.
Do the sports conspiracy podcast.
Oh, let's not.
Do just sports conspiracies.
Let's not.
Hey, don't tread on my turf.
Yeah.
If it had everything to do with MMA and boxing and stuff, I'd be more than down. Like as far as MMA goes, like I wouldn't have to do any research. That would be easy for me.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, let's do it.
I also do a show called Sports Conspirators. That's what we talk about.
Oh no shit.
Yeah. Is that on a separate feed, or is that on the ATT feed?
It's behind a paywall right now until we get enough stacked up to release it as its own. It will be a standalone pod eventually.
Oh, okay. We actually just did an episode about sports conspiracies. I think one of the ones we did, I think Andrew would be really good for, because I was talking about Vladimir Klitschko and how he appeared to be poisoned or something, but with Andrew's medical background, he'd probably have a much better idea of what actually happened. But that was a really interesting
As
case,
much as I love boxing, it's one of the most corrupt sports.
Oh yeah,
It's a disappointing thing, isn't it?
yeah,
So-
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Oh, yeah. We did have a topic. The Battle of Los Angeles. But yeah, there's so much more we could say on this case. Like I have tons of newspaper articles and quotes and stuff, like just one random one here. Up to 25 silvery UFOs were also seen by observers on the ground. Editor Pete Jenkins of the Los Angeles Herald Examiner reported, I could clearly see the V formation of about 25 silvery planes overhead moving slowly across the sky toward Long Beach. So this is one of those cases where the more I looked into it, the deeper it went. Like it's one of those ones that it goes on. And like if I was going to read more source material and more newspaper articles and stuff like that, it could go on for, another hour or two easily. But yeah, so I mean, that's kind of all I had on this. Is anybody else got anything else they wanted to say about the Battle of Los Angeles before we wrap it up here?
Not jumping out. I don't have anything else.
Before we wrap it up here, Braden, why don't you tell us where we can find your show?
Anywhere you find podcasts, Alien Theorists, Theorizing. We're on social media. Just type it in. We're everywhere. You can find us. TikTok, all that jazz. If you like this show, you like our show. If you like our show, you like this show.
All right.
hot dog.
And didn't we want to mention about the hospital in Texas?
We did. I forgot about that. We definitely wanted to mention that.
No, okay, this is a hot topic, and we normally don't discuss COVID on the show, but this is non-political here. This is actually really, really nice, really cool. There's a team in Texas, and it's led by doctors Peter Hotez and Maria Botazzi, and they've found a way to create a vaccine using technology that's decades old. Essentially, it's the same way you create a hepatitis B vaccine. So it's really accessible. It's really cheap for countries to develop. And we wanted to give them a shout out because the unique thing about this particular vaccine is they don't plan on patenting it. Patenting. They don't plan on, they're just going to let any country use it and develop it, which is different than the big pharmaceuticals.
Yeah,
so
open source.
Open source, very exciting. They're dubbing it Corbivax, and they say it's going to be the world's COVID vaccine.
And this is so crazy to me because they're leaving millions of dollars, private jets, private islands. I mean, how much money could they make off of this? And they're just saying, nope, we're just going to release this out into the wild. Everybody's welcome to have it. So that was a little encouraging after, the messy couple of years we've had to see something like that, And
not all heroes wear capes, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Well, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you could really help us out by giving us a good review wherever you listen to podcasts and suggesting the show to your friends.
Keep it strange.